Hey, it's Lynn, and today I'm coming at you with a book review. And this one is a little different from my usual fare. We're talking about I'm Glad My Mom Died author Jennette McCurdy's debut novel, Half His Age, which dropped earlier this year and has been stirring up a lot of conversation within and outside the reading community. Whether you loved her memoir, whether you've never read her at all, I think this book is worth discussing. So let's get into it. The novel centers on Waldo, a 17-year-old girl living in Anchorage, Alaska, who has essentially raised herself. Her mother is emotionally volatile and is caught up in her own cycles of crisis, leaving Waldo to navigate adolescence largely on her own, with a yawning emotional hunger that she doesn't quite have the language to name. It's that particular loneliness, the kind that lives in a house with other people but still manages to feel completely airless, that sets the stage of everything that follows. Into that vacuum steps Mr. Corgi, Waldo's 4-year-old married creative writing teacher, and the two enter into a sexual relationship that stretches across the better part of a year. What McCurdy is careful to establish from the outset is how Waldo experiences this, not as something happening to her, but as something she is actively choosing, even orchestrating. She is convinced, with a full and devastating certainty of a teenager who has never been truly seen, that Mr. Corgi is the only person capable of understanding her. That he is, frankly, an unremarkable and somewhat bored man who is simply available. This is something the reader understands long before Waldo does. Running alongside the relationship is Waldo's compulsive online shopping, a habit the novel draws into direct parallel with her fixation on Mr. Corgi. Both are attempts to fill something that cannot be filled from the outside. Both arrive with the temporary relief of acquisition and the inevitable hollowness that follows. McCurdy isn't subtle about this thematic architecture, but she is precise about it. And there's something quietly devastating about watching a teenager mistake consumption for connection over and over again in two different registers simultaneously. So, let me start with what I think this book does genuinely well, because there is real craft here worth acknowledging. The writing itself is sharp and controlled in a way that I wasn't entirely expecting. McCurdy has a gift for thinking about the interior. She stays close inside Waldo's head, and that closeness produces something of the most honest and uncomfortable prose in the book. There are moments of real bluntness, scenes that don't soften their edges or apologize for their content, and I think that unflinching quality is actually doing important work. It would have been easy and probably safer to write around some of what happens here to imply rather than render. But McCurdy doesn't do that. She commits to showing you exactly what Waldo sees and feels and tells herself. And that willingness to stay in the discomfort is, I'd argue, part of the point. The portrayal of Waldo as an imperfect victim is the most intellectually honest thing that the novel does, and also the thing that makes it the most difficult to sit with. She is not passive. She pursues, she initiates, she constructs elaborate internal narratives that position her as the one with the power in this dynamic. And the novel lets her do all of that. It doesn't intervene, doesn't editorialize, it doesn't place a corrective hand on her shoulder and tell the reader what to think. And I think that restraint is a genuine craft achievement. Because what we get instead is an unmediated view into the psychology of a teenager who has been so starved for attention and agency that she has mistaken exploitation for intimacy. And she doesn't know it yet. But the reader does. The gap is where the book lives. I also want to talk about the mother-daughter dynamic because I think it's the emotional center of the novel in a way that doesn't always get enough attention in the conversations about and surrounding this book. Waldo's mother isn't a villain in any clean sense. She's damaged and self-absorbed and emotionally consuming, the kind of parent who takes up so much space in a house that her child learns to exist in the margins. McCurdy renders this relationship with a complicated tenderness. Waldo wants her mother's love desperately, and that desperation is the open wound that Mr. Corgi steps into. The novel understands that child abuse doesn't only happen in dramatic confrontations. It happens in years of quiet neglect, in a child who grows up never learning what it feels like to have her needs met or even matter. Now I want to address the criticisms of this book because they are plentiful, and honestly, most of them are valid. A lot of readers have found the graphic content gratuitous. Some of the scenes are explicit in ways that feel less like narrative necessity and more like provocation for its own sake, and I don't think that that's an unfair reading. There are also legitimate concerns about character development, particularly around Mr. Corgi, who remains fairly opaque throughout. If you come to this book wanting a fully realized portrait of a predator, the way, say, My Dark Vanessa gives you Kent in all his manipulative complexity, you're not going to find that here. McCurdy is writing from inside Waldo, and Mr. Corgi only exists insofar as Waldo perceives him, which is, to say bluntly, incompletely. The comparison to Lolita also gets raised frequently, and it's worth engaging with honestly. Lolita is a masterwork of unreliable narration. The prose is so seductive and so constructed that the reader has to do active work to see through the violence underneath. McCurdy is not operating at that level of literary architecture, and I don't think she's trying to. What she's doing is different, and I'd argue valuable in its own right. She's writing something more accessible, more immediate, less mediated by high style. And there's a reader for whom Lolita's density is a barrier, for whom My Dark Vanessa's psychological precision is its own kind of remove. And for that reader, this novel offers something those books don't, which is an unfiltered seat inside a teenager's mind as it happens. And I think that accessibility matters, actually. This isn't a book that asks you to do a lot of literary work to find the horror. It's right there on the surface, wearing Waldo's face, narrated in her voice, presented without ironic distance. For readers who are trying to understand how this kind of relationship can feel from the inside, like love, who are trying to understand how a young person can both be a victim and a willing participant and not see the contradiction at all, this book offers a kind of direct transmission that more formally ambitious novels sometimes can't. So where does that leave me? If I had to give this book a rating, I'd land at 4 stars. And I want to be precise about what that means because I think that number can mislead. 4 stars does not mean I enjoyed every page of this the way I'd enjoy, say, an Abby Jimenez romance novel on a Sunday afternoon. These are not the same category of reading experience, and asking them to be would be absurd. What 4 stars means here is that this book has something real to say, and that it says it with enough conviction and enough craft that I came away feeling like the time was well spent. It made me think. It made me feel uncomfortable in ways I think were deliberate and earned. It gave me a portrait of adolescent longing and damage that I found genuinely affecting, and that is not nothing. I don't think this is a perfect novel by any means, and I don't think McCurdy would claim it is, but I do think it's an important one. Important in the specific way that accessible, unflinching portrayals of exploitation can be important for the readers who most need to see that experience named and examined. And if that sounds like your kind of reading, I'd encourage you to pick it up and form your own opinion. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You are awesome. Stay awesome. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.